Hello everyone, here's my audience. For my informative speech, I'm doing the attack on Pearl Harbor. The attack on Pearl Harbor was one of the biggest turning points for the United States, as this was the main reason on why we entered World War II. The main question I was asked is, why did the Japanese choose Pearl Harbor? What was so significant about Pearl Harbor, and how were they so successful at just completely annihilating and damaging the beautiful harbor in Hawaii? And I actually got the honor to visit the harbor in the summer of 2011, and I got to witness firsthand of how these people saw it and how the harbor was so easy to attack and target. The main reason on why the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor was because they were mad at the U.S. because the U.S. pretty much completely shut off all of their resources. And it started in the September of 1940 when the U.S. placed an embargo on the prohibition by prohibiting the exports of steel, scrap, iron, and aviation fuel because Japan was expanding into Indochina and taking over Indochina. The following year, in July of 1941, Japan further occupied Indochina, and the U.S. froze all of their assets. This prevented Japan from buying aviation fuel and oil, which would eventually cripple their army and their navy in the future. The U.S., their main goal was that they wanted the Japanese to stop their expansion. They demanded them that they withdraw from Indochina immediately, but the U.S. was not willing to go to war about it. There was no settlements made, and the Japanese general stated on November 29th that it was the last day that Japan would accept a settlement without war, and no settlement was made. So the Japanese general was then told to devise a war plan, and this war plan was that the greatest fear that Japanese had was the Pacific Fleet of the United States, and this fleet was very strong and very powerful, and it was all located in Pearl Harbor in Hawaii. Before the attack was launched, the U.S. actually broke the diplomatic code of the Japanese, and a warning was actually sent out to Washington, D.C., but it was too late when it arrived. When the planes began coming into the harbor, they were actually detected by radar, but the radar people thought that it was just a flight of B-17s that were doing from the west coast. Japan had a very detailed strategy, but the most important part of the strategy was that it all happened by surprise. That was the main part of the success of their attack. The first wave that they launched was at 6 a.m. It consisted of 183 planes, and 2 hours later it hit Pearl Harbor. And on a very beautiful Sunday morning in Hawaii, as you can imagine, it was a very lazy and peaceful day for the people, as the people were probably still asleep or getting ready to go to church. So the people were completely unaware and weren't expecting an attack. The main part that the Japanese hit was the battleships, and they were all placed in a line called Battleship Row, which meant they were all lined up side by side from one another. There's 8 ships in Battleship Row, but there's 8 ships in the harbor, but only 7 ships were in Battleship Row, as the USS Pennsylvania was in the dry dock for repairs. The most probably popular battleship that was destroyed was USS Arizona, and the Japanese dropped the bomb straight into the artillery area where all the artillery is kept, and the bomb exploded, and all of the artillery exploded with it, which caused a very huge explosion of fire. And when this explosion happened, it killed 1,177 crewmen, which is about half of the total Americans that were killed that day. The Japanese launched a second wave 30 minutes after the first one, which consisted of 170 planes. And the attack only lasted 2 hours. The Japanese left at 10 a.m., but the U.S. paid a very fearful price, and it was very violent. 21 ships of the fleet were either sunk or destroyed. 347 aircraft were either destroyed or damaged. There was 2,403 people that died. Another 1,500 were wounded. Japan only lost 29 planes, which was 10% of the attacking force. The U.S. was very lucky that the aircraft carriers were out of the harbor, as this came back to haunt Japan, as the aircraft carriers played a key role of eventually winning World War II. The U.S., obviously the powerful nation we are, wanted some kind of revenge against them, and General Yamamoto of Japan actually said that, "I fear that we have awakened a sleepy giant," and that's exactly what they did, as Roosevelt, the day after, on December 8, 1941, declared war, and Roosevelt stated that Pearl Harbor was a date that will live in infamy. So the day after, on December 8th, Congress declared war, and we officially entered World War II. As I said, I actually got to visit Pearl Harbor, so now we will be able to view what I got to view of Pearl Harbor in this slideshow. This is the USS Missouri. This is where the surrender was signed on this ship. This is where all the countries came together. And this is the surrender of the signed names of all the countries' presidents, where they boarded the ship and all signed the surrender. This is the view from the USS Missouri. This is where the Japanese plane that came, the tourman that was touring us told us that this is the same view of where the Japanese planes entered the harbor. That's where they came from. This is Battleship Row right here. This is where all the battleships were lined up, and it made it easy to see on how big of a target they were as they were all lined up together. This lady actually witnessed and survived Pearl Harbor. She was in the harbor when the attack hit, so she got to witness it and survived. This is the USS Arizona Memorial. That's me with the remainder of the ship that's left above. And there's actually oil from the ship that drips up to the surface that you're able to see when it comes. And this is the list of names of all the people that died on the day of Pearl Harbor, and it's a mighty long list, and it recognizes all the people that lost their lives that day. So in conclusion, being able to witness that Pearl Harbor and going there and seeing the memorials and the harbor and how beautiful it is, I just couldn't imagine what it looked like when it got attacked. So it was really an amazing experience for me. So the Japan attack really crippled us. It really hurt our fleet, but we sought our revenge, and by entering the war, we finished off the war by dropping the atomic bomb, and it recorded as a victory for World War II.